With nearly 12,000 tools available, selecting the right Martech can be challenging. Meet the Martech Intelligence Reports, free buyer's guides exploring specific platforms, including purchase considerations, leading players, adoption trends, and more. No matter where you are in the purchase journey, Martech Intelligence Reports can help.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Martech Reimagined, building a stack for the dominant forces of data and AI. My name is Milton Wong, and I'm the principal at Mission Martech, and I'll be your moderator for today's discussion. I'm really excited for this panel discussion. Hopefully, you've all been enjoying the Martech event today and extracting a lot of insights. I'm pleased to be joined by Florian, Natalie, and Angela. I would love to just go around real quickly and have them introduce themselves, and then we will start a great conversation. So, Florian, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks, Milton. I'm Florian Delval. I lead product marketing at Snowflake for marketing and advertising use cases. And so I spent my life between ad tech, martech, data, and AI to drive business outcomes.
Awesome. Thanks, Florian. How about Natalie?
Yeah, nice to be here. My name's Natalie Jackson. I'm the Director of Demand Generation at CBiz. We are a large professional services firm that does everything from accounting, tax, audit to benefits, insurance, and so much more. But looking forward to talking about the data challenges there.
Awesome. Thanks, Natalie. And then last but not least, Angela.
Hi, I'm Angela Vega. I'm Director of Capabilities and Operations at Expedia Group, and I lead a global CRM capabilities and ops across brands that you probably know: Expedia, hotels, Vrbo, everything from platform migrations, as well as deciding what the next AI-enabled marketing tech stack is. So super excited to be here and to see how data and AI are reshaping the stack.
Awesome. Thanks, Angela, and to the rest of the panelists. Appreciate that. Just a quick reminder to all of you joining. We know there's a great number of you joining today. If you have questions, comments during the session, please drop them into the chat. We want to keep today live and interactive for all of you. We'll also have a couple polls coming up. We'll do our best to bring your comments and questions into the conversation. So let's get started. To kick things off, I'd love to ask the first question, which is very much in line with the theme of today's panel, which is, what is the biggest challenge that you're dealing with, in Angela and Natalie's case, in their businesses, or in Florian's case, what's the biggest challenge he's seeing coming from his customers related to the stack and data and these forces of data and AI? So we'll go around the whole panel and get these views, but I'd love to start maybe with you, Florian, first, what are you seeing and hearing from customers related to their stack and these disruptive forces of data and AI?
I think it comes from the complexity, and the complexity partially comes from the volume of change happening right now in our ecosystem, on the pace at which these changes are happening. We really always at Snowflake think about it as three different forces. There is everything around privacy that we're seeing today. The changes around third-party cookies, we talked about it for years, not as much in the last 12 months anymore, but there will be certainly other things coming. Then there is AI, obviously. I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit today. And the first one is all this idea of you need to keep your data secure on possibly at one place. Let's discuss that maybe. But that requires to rethink the way you organize not only your data, but also the integrations between the elements of your stacks on how you integrate systems together.
Awesome. Yes, plenty for us to dig into. All right. How about Natalie? What's the biggest challenge you're seeing with your team, your efforts related to your stack and data and AI?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the funnest, the best part, the most fun part of being at CVIZ is we do have more than 300 different services. And so I always joke it's everything from a multi-million dollar international tax engagement all the way down to who I affectionately call Kyle the kayak guide. So maybe doing like adventure sports insurance. So the target audiences are oftentimes wildly different. Where that data is captured sometimes is very different, right? So we have sort of multi-layered data systems, lots of different places where information about this target audience might live, and lots of really positive, strong integrations. But I think what I think a lot about is data transformation. So if it looks like this in this data system, how does it need to look in this data system? And is that system set up so the two can talk to each other? As well as you think about the very real factor of every large B2B organization I have ever known, or everyone I know who works at one, you have the real challenge of, with that many cooks in the kitchen, people who might be creating records in your CRM systems, in your marketing automation systems, in your client billing systems, all these different places. I mean, you run into data that isn't always accurate or isn't always positive or right, especially on the prospect side. So how do you navigate prospect data such that you can turn it into opportunities and revenue when you're talking about multi-layered systems, especially as you think about AI? I think the biggest question that I have for myself personally when it comes to AI is anybody's data good enough for it to really bring into reality the magic that it proposes? Hopefully. I
Got it.
think
Yes, we'd love to talk about good enough quality for AI to function and deliver good outcomes. But let's turn this question over to you, Angela. What are the biggest challenges that you're seeing related to data and AI in your stack?
Yeah, I feel like Natalie said there's always going to be questions about data cleanliness and if everything's perfect. And the thing is we know that we'll never get to that sort of perfect. However, we should be able to get to a level of good enough. And I think especially in this age of AI, as we start thinking about data, a lot of the times we think of these nice, tidy boxes that are always filled in, that has, the right structure and the right mapping to other things that, eventually allows us to hopefully create context for the person we're reaching out to. But I know that can be super hard. So I'm sure hopefully some of you have traveled with Expedia or booked through hotels or with Vrbo. And when it comes to travel, I mean, we have a massive amount of data. We're a two-sided marketplace. We have our travelers, we have our partners. And because of that, like, I know we talk a lot about data quality, but it's also about having it at the right granularity to connect certain things. So think about, for example, trips. I'm sure some of you have taken girls' trips versus maybe traveling with your family. That's a very different sort of experience that you'd expect. And being able to understand that is so critical based on the context clues of what you're shopping for and where you're shopping for. But it also kind of comes down to the idea of data about our data. I mean, so many of us probably out there who are working with, email assets or push, like the idea of like what is making up that typical communication and how we tag it around loyalty or churn activation or maybe a certain topic. We don't necessarily do a lot of those things super well today. I believe at the granularity in which AI is going to need to be able to create, to navigate, and to make sure you have a really strong semantic layer so you as a person don't have to go in and create all those individual relationships, which is what we do with data today. We have that key there, and then we have tons of different data sources and views where we make that connection. So something that we are kind of working through is how do we get more data on our data, so everything from obviously a person can continue to navigate that, but also how we create essentially an agent enabled architecture for them to be able to navigate through those complexities.
Awesome. I know our panelists probably already want to piggyback on each other's comments, and I'll invite them to do so shortly. But we want to, get the rest of the audience engaged. So we're going to have our first poll, which is very much on this topic of data quality. So if I could ask the awesome conference team to launch the first poll. So here's the quick instructions for the poll. You'll be asked to join the audience to participate. Please enter your first name and then click on the Join Audience button. Then click on the polls icon in the top right corner of the video window that you've been in. You'll see the poll come up in the right side of the panel windows. Please select one option. We'll give about 20 seconds to give everyone a chance to respond. and then we will start commenting on those results. So again, very, very quickly, how do you take the poll? You'll be asked to join the audience to participate. Please enter your first name, click on the Join Audience button, click on the polls icon in the top right corner of the video window. You will see the poll come up in the right side of the panel window, and please select one option. All right. So panelists, we gave the audience 4 poll options, and we asked whether or not anyone would describe the current state of the data in their stack as a well-oiled machine, a work in progress, switching systems to fix it for the last time, I'm sure, or a Jenga tower. So I'm very curious to see the results of the poll.
I feel
All
like
right.
Jenga tower. Oh, really? I'm surprised. I was thinking Jenga tower was going to win.
Well, we've already identified, we were prepping, and we want to talk to all of you out there that are in the well-oiled machine category. The unicorns joining us from the audience. Please chime in with any best practices that you can share with the rest, but overwhelming majority work in progress. So I think it fits very, very much in line with what we were talking about. I love the notion that already got teased out around good enough data quality, right? Rather than are you 100%, because we know we'll never be there. So Florian, Natalie, Angela, would love for you to just continue piggybacking on that core data quality. Anyone want to jump in?
Yeah, I was thinking about this as I was listening to Angela, and I think as marketers, we already have challenges. I attended an event, a really nice, large event earlier this year, probably about 3 months ago. And what I noticed was like, I got an email this week that was like, "Hey, Natalie, I'm really sorry you couldn't make it. Here's a recap of all the sessions." I was like, I was there. Like, I made it. And I think that's an example of where, just thinking about what Angela was saying, sometimes it comes down to just human input. And when you have human input, whenever you have human input, and there are some things where you just actually will. Event attendance is a great example. Somebody has to capture the event attendance. Somebody has to be saying, Angela showed up. And I think every time you run into a situation like that, it really begs the question of what can you do as a marketer to still create a hands-on experience like the one Angela was talking about, so that people still feel known and recognized, and like you are aware of how they interacted with you, without speaking to it too directly, right? So like if there's an error in your data, how can you frame the messaging so that it's a little bit squishier and less direct? Like rather than saying like, Natalie, you didn't show up. Why not send me something that was like, hey, so glad that you were interested in this year's event. Here's a recap of everything that could have been there, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah. Florian or Angela, do you want to continue that chat on good enough data quality?
Yeah, I mean, when I was hearing Angela also, as Natalie was mentioning, about the work on semantic data on top of the existing data, I can already tell that there is a good level of maturity in the approach on strategy. And I think when we're talking about good enough, it's also understanding by where you're starting from, like how mature is your organization on your data today, because there's so much noise in a sense on conversations about agentic AI, on the opportunities there. But if you're immature in your data, if you're a consumer good company just getting started into direct to consumer, you certainly can't really talk yet about deploying agents yourself. You don't have the data for it, or the good enough data in a sense. So it's really understanding on like where are you at today. And for companies who are in a really mature space with their data, I would say at some point it's thinking about how much additional cleanliness will actually move the needle for my business. Because at some point, the cost of improving that data may not reward you with anything meaningful. And that's where today I think there is an exciting new opportunity, which is starting to think about unstructured data, like places where you have information, but you're not touching it yet. And that's where AI will help us do things that up until this day was not possible.
That sounds so scary to me, Florian. And I know like people say unstructured data to me, and it's triggering.
That's more.
It shouldn't. I know it can feel a little bit scary, but I completely agree with what you're saying, especially if you're in a mature state. Like when I think about it, today the data that we think about, like I said, lives in a box, right? And we even think when people are interacting with their products, fill in your first name and all these sorts of pieces, right? But we already know that users, the way that they're interacting with pieces of like products, especially if they're consumer facing, they're now starting to explain the things that they want. So in travel, yes, there is a place to where I go and I press a billion buttons to say, okay, I want to go to this property. I want to take this flight. But eventually, we are moving to the state to where I, as a person, go to an interface, ideally on still our own product sort of website and our interface that says, I'm really looking for a trip. I want to go to Florence, Italy with my 3 kids. I need some place that's going to be super close to a beach. And then all of that, the ability to be able to, one, first take that interpretation and realize what do I need to provide back to the users. But then 2, if I then want to use that information to do outbound marketing in some sort of way to bring them back, how do we then take that, put it into a structure that can be read to then reach out and bring them back and then to reflect that again back in the product? It becomes infinitely more complex, but also extremely interesting in the way that we're going to start thinking about different data structures.
Yeah.
Hopefully no one's brain breaks on that in the sense of no one should be scared. It's not exactly happening today, but I'm saying I definitely feel on a lot of our products, depending consumer-based products, that it's going to go towards that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the nature of good enough, then it answers that additional question, right? Back to the use cases you were talking about, right? Good enough for what, right?
Mm-hmm.
It may be the use case, right? Natalie, your example, good enough was if you just knew registration, but you didn't capture cleanly actual attendance, clearly, right? For your case, then good enough, they needed another layer of good enough before they sent that targeted follow-up that didn't represent your actual attendance there. So we're not leaving that topic, right? We're sort of adjacent to it, but in parallel with getting you all going on it, give you a moment to then sort of compose your thoughts on the next question while we engage everyone with our second poll. So the question that we are tossing out to all of you, as well as the audience, is in this ever-changing Martech stack, what do you all consider the center of the current Martech stack? And we're using center in the mythical quotes here because it used to have some pretty traditional uniform answers in this case. So for the audience, again, I'd like to ask you to take another poll. Please launch that and click on the polls icon again to engage with us. Top right corner of your video window, you'll see the poll come up in the side panel, and please select one of the options. More traditional to start, CRM, marketing automation platforms, data warehouse, and we left in there customer data platforms as the 4th choice. So while we're looking forward to hearing from the audience here on this, posing it to each of you, would love for you guys to comment. Florian, when you're engaging with your customers, what are you hearing relative to changes on the center of their Martech stacks?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of changes there, and the reason for that is really the evolution of the technology and the abilities, right? We already got a few years back a move from on-premise solutions, people literally hosting servers themselves, to the cloud. And today what we're seeing is cloud data solutions, data infrastructure can support much more workloads than in the past. Solutions like Snowflake initially were really used for analytics workloads. But today, more and more people are starting to use it as a center of their marketing practices. And so instead of copying the data from a solution like Snowflake to their individual Martech tools, they're bringing and leaving it in their Snowflake implementation and then integrating their business applications, their Martech tools on top of it. All of that, we're seeing it deploy across organizations. But I'll be honest, I think some smaller companies will definitely start with just having a CRM. They will have a less complex stack. And in that case, they will consider that CRM is the center of the stack. But again, it depends on the size of the organization, the size of their teams, and their maturity, back to the maturity point.
Got it. All right. Natalie, for you and your team, what do you consider the center of your stack?
I think when I think about this as a B2B marketer, I'll kind of take it from that angle. One of the things that I think is really promising is the fact that we do now have things like data warehouses where you could unify people by other characteristics outside of a singular email address. And I think that's always been the biggest challenge for us when we look to a CRM system as your single point of truth. Because for all B2B organizations, or I should say most, the best next customer you have is the one you already had who changed jobs. The challenge then becomes, how do you capture that person in a classically oriented CRM system like Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics? You don't. They become new records. And for all intents and purposes for the database, it looks like two different people. I think the promise of things like data warehouses and CDPs is that you can then start to build out some commonalities and say, hey, Milt here is actually the same Milt as the Milt over here. And then you're truly tracking the relationship with somebody across multiple years, exclusive of their email address. So I think that's for me the promise of tools like this is being able to unify those profiles. And I think as other tools out there, social media platforms come to mind, especially the ones where businesses are using them to keep track of interactions. That's not happening with your business email address. By and large, that's happening with your personal email address. So having a way to say, here's Milt at his current company, and here's Milt at his personal life, and being able to unify the two into a single Milt is where the promise from those types of systems really comes into play.
Awesome. Yes, I can absolutely attest. That is one frequently asked question from some of my consulting clients. What do I do when they've moved? What do I do with the old contact and account record? Absolutely. Key question. How about yourself for that question, Angela?
Yeah.
What's the center of your stack? I know you've got that multi-dimensional two-sided marketplace. So are there multiple centers in that case?
Yeah, you're already reading my mind on this. So, I mean, I have a little bit of a contra view on this. So I don't think I know everyone, the simple answer is like, this is the thing. But for me, I believe that we're actually kind of moving more towards a modular sort of tech stack, which means there can be sort of no center. It's like a whole bunch of puzzle pieces. If I don't have all the puzzle pieces, I don't get a picture. Some of it I might be able to make out what it is if I put them together. But for the most part, I think as for maybe I would say like a decade ago, so much of this was about centralization. Go have your one partner, get everything in the exact same place. Everyone needs to input into the same thing with the exact same structure. And I think we're now moving towards, and I actually do think it's beneficial, like we have productization of our data, right? So whoever the owner of the thing that produces data is a product owner of making sure that it is consistent, it has a good availability, that it is complete, that it connects well in a data mesh, that you can have other data can have connections and conversations. I think the exact same way when we think about the tech stack, right? We have so many great sort of, CRM systems that have existed and continue to do extremely well that are, of course, are improving their capabilities on top of it. However, there's also a lot of new movers that are out there, and our jobs, at least I know when I'm thinking about what I need to do, is make sure I go get the best in class sort of tool that will help accomplish what I need. And hopefully, and luckily, it's at the places where we've had great partnerships, but we're always looking to understand what are those other pieces that we can add on. So the answer for me, a little bit of cop out, is there is no center, that it's all the things.
Got it. All right. Well, we had some great views expressed by the three of you from both myriad of customers as well as your individual situations. Let's see what we heard from our audience on this. All right, panelists, what do we think of the responses here in terms of center of our audience's stack? So maybe not surprising. CRM is still sort of in the lead position. I think Florian, you'll have a smile on your face to see the second lead position there with data warehouses and solutions, and then tie between the maps and the CDPs out there. So any surprises from the looking at this audience response?
I think think a lot of it probably depends on what type of business you are. If you're B2C or e-com, I think your marketing automation platform absolutely makes a lot of sense as your source of truth. If you're B2B, less of the case for us, right? That's where it really depends on what are you trying to keep track of and what are you trying to do long term. I would love to be able to add e-commerce functionality to very large B2B organizational implementations, but as of yet, nobody's willing to like add to cart tax services and buy them with their credit card. So like the marketing automation platform is key and critical, but not very well set up to track revenue. So I think it probably that breakdown is about type of business more than anything.
Got it. Other reactions to the audience results there, Angela or Florian?
I think I'm always super intrigued by Angela's perspective about no center, where I believe that it can be an option in terms of like the elements of your stack. Like you don't want to use one tool. At the same time, I think if you connect on or rethink about the data itself, you don't want copies of your data everywhere because you can't manage that data anymore. Like if you keep creating pipelines and just copying data on ETL or ELT from A to B to C to D, you lose track. So I think as you rethink your stack on your elements, it's how can you add the tools you need, but on the data that's already there in a sense. When you collect new data sets, where do you collect it to? Like, where do you store that new data sets? Can you rethink about centralizing the data to ease the governance without reducing the ability to leverage that across the different teams on systems you need to access data?
Yeah, totally understand that. And I think it's less about the idea of like creating long data pipelines that for each sort of end user has to create their own. Obviously zero copy is a place where we want to all go to, like a place where we can all go fish and get the data that we need. But I do think traditionally I've seen challenges that when everyone just dumps it into one centralized place and there isn't some sort of canonical sort of view of like, this is the one source of truth of this thing that exists. And then you get duplicates, like you said, that's also a little bit of a problem. But if we have clear understanding of what sort of groups or teams own those different sets of data sets, and that what should be contained in them and how they map to each other relationally. And then of course, create some sort of interface or place to where someone can easily plug into that, whether you're doing batch processing, which I know for large, I don't know how many of the audience, ends up sending billions of emails monthly versus maybe a couple thousand a week. But, the batch versus the API, it still all can be in a certain place. That's just a data processing sort of question. But I agree with what you're saying, that the objective is not to get to a place to where we have like a billion different data pipelines being set up depending upon the in-channel use of that. Because that is, I'm sure, what actually a lot of people are already doing today. And we all know it's extremely painful.
Yeah. I love the provocative nature. Well, future polls, Angela, will have to add the fifth option, which there is no more center, or we're all fooling ourselves if there can only be one center for the future. Any other sort of comments relative to either data quality, the challenges? Very shortly, we're going to be opening it up for additional audience Q&A. So some additional piggyback commentary on what's already been chatted about?
I think one other thing we haven't touched on yet is we've talked about lots of different data sources, and we've talked about the challenges and opportunities of unifying data sources. What we haven't really talked about is the very real problem that plagues many large organizations, and that is the problem of duplicates. And I think that is one where that's tough. Maybe that's an opportunity for a CDP or a data warehouse to help unify some of those in a way that maybe a CRM system or a marketing automation platform just simply isn't structured to do. But that is one where the question I often ask myself is, what is the common denominator? And that can be increasingly more difficult. Like, it does kind of take you back to old school tactics. Is it physical street address? Is it website domain? What is the thing that I can use to identify what makes these things the same if you're going to run a query to understand the impact of that on your system? I'm not sure if that's something that the other two have experienced or not.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, like within within travel, all three of the brands that, there's multiple brands, but the three big brands that we have, I had an account on each of those. And some of the things that we have done to do is where we have unified that under a way to where everyone logs in with the same thing now, which is a part of that unification process. But to your point, if we think about this in two ways, there's the whole entire organization has to agree on what is that individual unique identifier associated with that sort of person. We have loyalty accounts, and then we have people who come in with the email address, right? Is there a point to where is that relationship one-to-one? Is it one-to-many? And that's kind of like a decisions that the orgs obviously have to make. And that's something that I know we've been able to work through in creating that sort of like singular view of a person in that identifying. But to your point, when we get to more complex things to where we're trying to retarget, the amount of devices and browsers that people use, whether or not they're logged into, if I go and I open my app on my iPhone versus I then go into Chrome versus I then go into Safari, those are all three different experiences, whether or not I have logged in. And the ability to trace back to say like, oh, this is like a different GUID on here, but it's the same sort of device. And this device was attached to this person, but is this device something, maybe a family device? Because then I saw that somebody else logged into it. It's crazy, right? And I think there's some companies that have gone out for solving it. I know, but as privacy, as we've talked about, as more of those things obviously increase, as they should, right? Marketing's only bad when it's not relevant, right? But for the most part, most people on this call absolutely love great relevant marketing because it connects well with you. But that sort of thing, to be able to do that, requires us to have some level of information connection. But we're going to have to, understand what are the cost and the benefits of that, as well as obviously governing bodies and individual companies and all the service providers are also going to end up deciding for it. But you're right. It's a hard challenge. I think it's also very close to the date of like, what's good enough
Absolutely.
and not damaging when you send somebody something really terrible.
Yeah. Well, we're not stopping the conversation, but just sort of the invitation. A couple folks have commented in via the video panels, so inviting others to chat in a question that we'll pose to the panel and get some live reactions. We've got a couple great comments already come in. So again, please engage with us. We'd love to hear from you. And please pose a question if you want it directed to one individual person that you've heard from already. We'll try to do that as well. So got one comment. So they're hearing you, panel, right? So we've got one comment that came in. The promise of the data warehouse to connect my personal and business lives would be great. To be able to put it all together, but obviously recognizing that that's a challenge.
But
So,
you know what? It's
Yep.
sometimes I think you think about so my spouse is a anti like marketing data collection kind of person. So it's very interesting for us to like have conversations with each other about that because as a marketer, I want to be able to know who Milt the individual is versus Milt the corporate employee. As an individual, when we take that same tack, how do I like to be talked to? I am very unhappy about the fact that since most of us are either hybrid or remote now, there's a huge portion of the workforce that's hybrid or remote. Calls that used to go to my desk phone that were easily ignored because they were spam or selling me things or things that I don't care or want now ring through to my cell phone and or text message me directly. And I find that incredibly invasive. So there's also a part of me that's like, I don't want marketers knowing my cell phone number for that very reason. So it is sort of a fine line between like, if I'm going to give you that information so that you can use it to support a better relationship with me. Notice I said that instead of like, stalk me. Then there has to be some value in it for me as well. And spamming my cell phone while I'm trying to take my kids to soccer practice is a very bad time for you to try to make that move.
Yeah.
I think that's why there is a concept of having multiple identities that I think most organizations are not putting in place, which could allow you to have your unique, in a sense, B2B profile separately, maybe your unique like personal profile, and in some cases a combined one, so that a marketer could, based on the use case, decide how much they want the aggregated or in a sense less aggregated profiles. So really thinking about the use case and the potential benefits or not of going one way or another. And I think, Natalie, what could be interesting for organizations is also to think about the consent. Like, did you give consent about using your personal cell phone number to receive these messages?
Yes.
The answer is
And
no.
separating
but
the content. Yeah. Well, that sounds like maybe the potentially first starter answer to one of the questions that we did get in, Florian, in terms of structuring consent around that and maintaining some level of separation there. So one of the questions that came in was for the majority audience that is still work in progress in terms of working through all of these things. The question came in, right, is additional best practices from all of you in light of all the changes with AI and Martech stack trends. So maybe go around to everyone to offer some starting point guidance on the latest round of data cleanup initiatives that our audience members are likely embarking on.
Yeah,
Anyone want to
I
jump in
start,
first? Florian, go ahead.
double down on what I just said, meaning when you collect new data points, understand what you are allowed to do with that. Collect consent alongside that data point. Even if you're not using that immediately, because collecting that consent later on will be way more complex. So understand what you're collecting and why you're collecting it and what you will be allowed to do down the line with it.
Got it. Absolutely. Collecting it right at that point in time of collection. Great.
Yeah,
Other
absolutely.
thoughts, Angela or Natalie?
Yeah, I think on that sort of, consent sort of point, like especially as we start to look at expanded, channels that are going to exist. And hey, I mean, even right now, I'm sure plenty of other people have predicted it, but the way that people are interacting with aspects of like AI, whether it's your Chat GPT or something like your Gemini, those are also going to end up being like a layer that is available for marketing promotion. I haven't seen it happen yet, but I'm sure at some point it will. Obviously, Meta has been doing this for a while anyway. But what I kind of mean by that is like there's so many different like channels and experiences that you might want to connect with your customer through. And then I think to Florian's sort of point, it's like trying to go back and get that like 3 years later, or trying to understand like some of these pieces on whether or not you're trying to do it through WhatsApp or through email or through call, like getting some of that up front and being very clear on what value you are trying to provide to them by collecting that, giving them a better experience, giving them updates on when their trip is going to cancel their flight. Like you have to pair those things together, because saying like, hey, we have the right to contact you for any sort of reason, like that's not going to fly. So I think that's going to be super important. And then I think on another sort of best practice, which we've already touched on and everyone knows, but it bears repeating, is like everyone knows the term garbage in, garbage out. I know so many people were definitely getting hyped up on this idea of like this, AI is going to take all over sort of these things. And we also know, as people who are in the weeds and the messy decisions that have to be made, it is not prepared for the complexity of the different things that we have to take into context to be able to make decisions, which is kind of where the gap is that a lot of the time, all the data that we're thinking about is like whatever we've collected that's in our nice spreadsheets and rows, which should be. But we also, I would encourage everyone to also start thinking about the context that you have used in your brain or sits in your PowerPoint or your Word, like those sorts of things you need to start thinking about how those end up being accessible to be connected to aspects of your data that you have agreed upon in your business. That is that one source of truth, that these are your profiles for your people or your business or your thing, that every data set, i.e. in the future agent, can reference.
Got it. All right. We are headed towards a close. So we got some additional questions, and I think this is a great way to sort of close out, go around to everyone. We had 2 questions that I'm combining here is folks are interested. What is one thing that's been added to your stack that drove major business impact? And then other ways that you've transformed your data into usable insights for either sellers or marketers. So one of those 2. How about Natalie? You first. Additions
Yeah.
to your stack or transformations? Quick.
I love my account-based marketing software. that's like for B2B marketers is an absolute game changer that helps navigate so many challenges that you face in B2B marketing. So yeah, that's been the big one. I'm super happy that exists.
Got it. Awesome. How about Angela? Additions to the stack or ways to extract insights?
I'll do additions to the stack. It was actually presented, I think, at the last Connections this year, but we added Salesforce Data Cloud in partnership with Marketing Cloud, and it has definitely been a game changer for us personally. So, yeah.
Awesome. And then Florian, closing with you, seeing trends in terms of people extracting insights that they can use for sales and marketing.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many places. Actually, to reply to your previous question, I'd love to mention that on our side this week we added Snowflake Intelligence to our own stack, which is a new natural language tool integrated within our system. Again, I think all these suggestions were not AI related. I think it's exciting to see these AI tools being added to our stacks and starting to discover real value in it, which I think people had some doubts. We're starting to see that it's getting there. Like we're able to start seeing value from these tools.
Awesome. All right. Great closing point. Extracting value for our businesses with the tools, I think, is a great way to end today's panel. Florian, Natalie, Angela, really appreciated all of your insights. Great to be with you here for this panel. And for the audience, thanks for actively engaging with us. And hope you enjoy the rest of today's engaging events and panels with Martech. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Join the Martech conference November 4th for one powerful day of real-world strategies and live expert insights. Scan the QR code on screen to register now for free.